If we can, we will go ahead and bring this meeting to order. It is 5:15, and that's our regular meeting time, so we'll get started. This is the July 13, 27 meeting of the Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Chris Jordan, and I'm the chairman of this commission. I'd like to remind all the commission members and audience to please silence your electronic devices and things like that. And then for the commission members, if you would, try to remember to turn your microphones on so that everyone in the audience can hear us, as well as being taped this evening. If we could, we will start with introductions, and we've got Ms. Wiseman here tonight. So if you would introduce yourself, and then we'll go on around the room.
Erin Wiseman, 3rd Ward City Council member.
Matt Hall.
Mike Lester.
Bunny Tricky Cotton.
Bob George.
Dave Nunn.
Ann Strotman, City Staff.
Dale Vaughn.
Blake Marcus.
Dean Dutoy.
Michelle Mahoney.
Eric Barron, Planning and Zoning Division.
Sonny Sanders, City Staff.
Brian Wolford, City Staff.
No, thank you. Sorry about that. I'll just leave it on for the night. With that being said, Blake Marcus will vote. Matthew Hall and Michelle Mahoney will not be voting at this point, but you will be engaging in the discussion points and whatnot.
One moment, Mr. Chairman. How many regular members are absent?
2.
2, and so 2 alternates can fill their positions, correct?
We have 6. We have 6 regular members, so we need two voting? Okay. So we were going to change that, and Matthew Hall will be voting as well. Michelle, once again, you'll be there for discussion. We will have a call for cases. We only have 1 case tonight. I believe we have a representative from the city as well as the Capital Region Medical Center. But so the case number that we're going to be doing tonight is case number P17016. It is the adoption of the historic South Side Old Munichburg District and Neighborhood Plan Comprehensive Plan Amendment. Is that correct?
Yes, and I will go through and give an introduction to that matter when that case comes up, and then I think perhaps the representative from Capital Region might have a few words to say on it as well.
Great. Obviously, we have no request for continuance, no request to reorder the agenda. I guess, Eric, we need to let you tell us about the format of the hearing and order of testimony.
Yes, because the one case on the agenda is a public hearing. We'll go through the format of the hearing. We'd like to briefly describe those procedures. First, the proceedings of the meeting are being recorded, so I ask that anyone from the public who speaks, please step to the microphone and give your name and address before speaking. For the one case on the agenda, after a brief introduction by city staff, the Capital Region would likely say a few words regarding the case. That opening presentation will be somewhat lengthy, as it is a neighborhood plan, and there's a number of different elements to cover within it. After that, we will ask to hear from any supporters of the request. We'll then ask to hear from any opponents of that request, and then ask to hear from anyone else who wishes to speak on the request. After that, the city staff will describe, give any other information regarding the proposal, including the staff report. In order to reduce the time necessary to hear the matter, reference to printed materials, including staff reports, any applicable findings, ordinances, or statutes will not be read into the record unless directed by the Planning Commission. The Commission will then close testimony from the floor, and then prior to motion or discussion on the case, discuss the proposal, and then publicly make its determination with reasons. And the form of the motion shall be positive. That is, the motion shall be made to accept the request as it's presented, or with any modifications, stipulations, or conditions. The final vote being taken, ayes in favor, nays opposed, with the chairman announcing the results of the vote. And the following documents are entered as exhibits for all items under consideration this evening. The City Code of the City of Jefferson has amended, the Comprehensive Plan and Land Use Map, copies of applications under consideration, a list of property owners to whom notices were sent, affidavit of publication of public notice in the newspaper, copies of drawings, plans, and/or renderings under consideration, letters or memoranda from staff, the staff reports, minutes of proceedings, and letters, photos, memoranda, or other materials submitted by the public or the applicant, and rules of procedure for the Jefferson City, Missouri Planning and Zoning Commission. These items are all public record and available for inspection in the Department of Planning and Protective Services or through the Office of the City Clerk. And please be advised that any items that are presented to the Planning Commission this evening become property of the Commission. This includes any photographs, drawings, renderings, petitions, or letters. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next, we'll move on to the adoption of the agenda. I'm going to leave the microphone on for the night. When we're ready, I will entertain a motion. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Ms. Ann has provided us the minutes from the regular meeting of the June 8th, 2017 meeting. I'm sure that we've all looked through that, but if not, we'll take a moment here to pause and do that, and when someone's ready, we'll entertain a motion.
I'd move that we approve the meeting minutes from the regular meeting of June 8th as presented.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Eric, do we have any communications received? Wait, huh? Oh, sorry. I'm really off tonight. Might want to check that. We do have the special meeting of May 26, 2017 minutes. So when someone's ready, we'll...
I move that we approve the special May minutes as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries. Next, we'll move on to communications received. Eric, do we have anything?
No, we have not received any communications for the cases tonight.
Thank you. We'll open up our new business. Case number P17016, the adoption of the historic South Side Old Munichburg District and Neighborhood Plan Comprehensive Plan Amendment. Eric, please tell us a little bit about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a fairly large item. These types of things do not come in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission often. It is a full neighborhood plan. It was originally commissioned by Capital Region Medical Center, who hired a consulting firm, H3 Studios, to look at the neighborhood surrounding their hospital and look at what can be done to improve on it. It's before you tonight as a formal matter to hold a public hearing and formally adopt this neighborhood plan as a component of the city's comprehensive plan. The city has a comprehensive plan document, and there have been other plans that have been adopted as components of that document, including things such as the Greenway Master Plan, the Central East Side Neighborhood Plan, so another neighborhood plan, and several others. This would be an additional neighborhood plan that would be a component of the city's comprehensive plan, if approved. This matter was brought before the Planning and Zoning Commission as a work session item on May 26th, and so that was the meeting minutes that you just approved, was the minutes of that meeting. As is common for items as complex as a neighborhood plan, we wanted to present the matter more informally to the Planning and Zoning Commission to allow any feedback before bringing it forward as an official action item. And so first, to kind of give you an idea on the area of the city that the plan is focused on, up on the screen is a location map showing a good portion of the city. To orient you, the Missouri River is shown up here on the top of the screen with the Missouri State Capitol just below it. And the primary focus area of the plan is shown there. They're highlighted. They do make some recommendations outside of that area. I think this is the area they were primarily focused on, and then spread out just a little bit to incorporate some of the outlying regions and make recommendations on that as well. But generally speaking, it's the area south of the downtown Jefferson City, so south of the highway and McCarty Street, going all the way to essentially Stadium Boulevard, but including some property along Christie Drive. And then going as far east as Lincoln University and some of the neighborhood just on the other side of Lincoln University. And as far west, actually, as basically Missouri Boulevard, Wares Creek, and Helias High School. So it incorporates a fair portion of the city. We often refer to it as the South Side or Old Munichburg, but also many of the surrounding residential areas and getting into some of the more commercial areas along the highway, Highway 54. There's a few things I wanted to point out. First, while this plan was commissioned by Capital Region Medical Center, this is not a hospital facilities plan. This is not something that the hospital has put forward to show how they would grow. It's more of the hospital looking, realizing they've they have a significant investment in this area. They have just recently completed some very large projects, expanding on that investment, and they look at the neighborhood surrounding it and think, trying to think of ways to improve on that. And in doing so, chose to hire a consulting firm to go through a professional city planning process. Something very similar to what a city might do if the city staff might do if targeted toward a certain area of the city. But to go through a process of engaging the public and preparing a plan with some professional planning recommendations on how to improve the neighborhood. And so that's what this document is. Also, the plan is not fiscally constrained. There are a number of very large recommendations within the plan, and there are not dollar amounts attached to them. It's not necessarily the role of this body to try to determine what is financially feasible or not. Obviously, things need to be practical, but the different recommendations of the plan can touch on different departments and funding sources within the city, and even items outside of the city, and so it's not something to necessarily be focused on the dollar amounts when you see the different recommendations of the plan. And also, there was a significant amount of research and analysis conducted even before starting the public process of seeing what the community and the area would like to see within the South Side area. The planning firm, H3 Studios, went through a pretty extensive collection of information regarding history, building condition and occupancy, the street circulation network and its condition, sidewalk and its condition, and parking and land use. And so a lot of those components, while I'm not presenting them this evening, are contained within the plan and were a good starting point in order to then build on various recommendations. As I mentioned, there was a significant public involvement component within the plan. The consulting firm held a number of stakeholder interviews, public workshops, focus groups, and had an advisory committee. There's a significant number of people in the community that took place in this process, and city staff participated in the majority, if not all, of the steps along the way. And so most plans start out with a vision goal, some sort of statement of what the plan is trying to accomplish. And so this plan does that as well. And so up on the screen is first the neighborhood vision, what was determined that the plan was focused on doing as a general vision statement. And then also some initial goals that were identified as being ideal or being worth pursuing within the plan. And so this map that's shown up on the screen is kind of a good overview map. I realize that it's very difficult to read, especially up on the screen like this. There is a printed version out in the hallway as well. But it gives an overview, a general overview of the recommendations of the plan, which are then kind of focused on even tighter with visuals that are a little bit easier to show and represent up on the screen. For specific areas contained within the neighborhood. But I wanted to point out that this is really the main visual within the plan. It gives the kind of the overall idea of what the plan recommends. Within this visual, there is a couple items I'll point out. One is, and a lot of the items are color coded down here in the bottom left hand corner. Again, it's a little bit easier to read the version out there in the corridor outside the room. But it recommends a spread of existing and infill commercial development. So not only protecting certain areas of commercial development, but using infill to strengthen those areas. Areas of new infill residential buildings. So there's some areas that are identified as being ideal to fit additional residential buildings in. Or redevelop. Areas proposed for long-term redevelopment, and so there is a color code down here in the bottom left. Again, difficult to read up on the screen, but areas that are really targeted toward redevelopment rather than trying to work with the existing development there. And then also areas proposed for parkland, especially some of the flood-prone areas. And we'll go through and give some details on that later in the presentation. The recommendations of this plan are really broken into two parts. First is a set of 10 neighborhood development principles. These are general recommendations that cover, for the most part, the entire neighborhood. They're general things that can be applied almost universally or along entire street corridors. And then the second part is the 4 long-term focus areas. These are more specific recommendations that look at very specific spots within the neighborhood and some very specific type of recommendations on how they should be used or redeveloped. And so my plan this evening was to go through each of those 10 and 4, so 14 different recommendations within this plan and briefly touch on each one of them. And so the first recommendation is to develop the the Highway 50 corridor as an urban boulevard. And there's a very good visual there up on the screen that shows what that means. It's basically to beautify it, to perhaps put a greenway along it, to include some landscaping. Make it more pedestrian friendly, improve the crosswalks that are on it, and to use it to establish more of a front door to the neighborhood. There's one item that was brought up, I think, consistently, is that the view of the neighborhood from the highway is not necessarily the most ideal. And so trying to beautify that corridor up and establish some nodes there that act as front doors to the neighborhood is one of the first recommendations of the plan. And also to provide that better connection between Old Munichburg and the downtown Jefferson City. In the form of crosswalks and again, just a general public perception of being able to cross that barrier a little bit easier. Number 2, build the heart of the community. And for this, they're really talking about the Dunklin Street commercial node there. To create a core mixed-use business district there along Dunklin Street. So up on the screen is the portion of Dunklin Street where really has the more downtown style development. You see Madison Street and Jefferson Street being located right there in the center of the screen. And so to improve on the streetscape designs that are within that area, to preserve the brick storefront buildings, to improve pedestrian walkability, so make improvements to the sidewalk, and to establish design guidelines, an overlay zoning district that would actually have certain design requirements for any new commercial buildings that are built there to ensure that they're constructed in a typical downtown style development that's already in place there, or any buildings that might be rehabbed or something. Number 3, to develop a distinctive community identity on Dunklin Street. And of course, we all know that Dunklin Street is fairly popular for festivals. Okay, and so a recommendation of the plan is to improve on the streetscape design in order to further support the operation of those festivals. Also, to locate signage and other markers, to kind of highlight the history within the neighborhood. There's a number of different historical buildings and such that can be highlighted and give the area a little bit more character to pedestrians and visitors, that are visiting the area or visiting the city. Possibly to develop a public plaza area, and there's a little bit more information on that later on in one of the other recommendations. And to pursue a street design that supports both bicycle and pedestrian use as well as vehicular use. So more of a bike-friendly and pedestrian-friendly streetscape within the area. Number 4, to improve the streetscape image and character. And so one recommendation of the plan was really to improve on particularly the north-south routes that are going through the neighborhood. So I have 2 street cuts that are shown up here on the screen. And these are really kind of specific recommendations on how to improve a couple of the streets, the north-south streets particularly, that go through the area. And so the top one here is Madison Street, and then the bottom one is Stadium Boulevard street improvements. And so on the screen here, you see those as items number 2 and 3. Okay, yeah, I'll carry on after that. Number 5, to expand housing choices. This recommendation is really targeted toward not only using funding programs to encourage housing rehabilitation within the area. See that there's a number of houses that could benefit from being rehabbed, and a program to encourage that might be appropriate. But also establishment of an inspection program for rental housing is commonly referred to as a rental conservation program. And so a regular inspection program for rental housing in order to ensure it meets the minimum requirements of the property maintenance code, for example. And to perhaps again establish some architectural requirements, very similar to what I present for the core Dunklin Street area, some architectural requirements that would preserve the character of housing within some of the residential areas. So if there's areas within the neighborhood that have a fairly consistent architectural design or brick fronts and such, to have an overlay zoning district in place to further encourage any new development that would be in the area to match that existing design prevalent in the area. Number 6, create an expanded interconnected park and greenway system. So there's 2 different visuals shown up on the screen. One is closer to Missouri Boulevard on the western side of the neighborhood. And has Wares Creek located flowing through it. And so the plan essentially recommends that some of this flood-prone area be converted, long-term, be converted to parkland. Also, then on the more eastern side along Lafayette Street, this is the second visual, which the intersection of Lafayette and Dunklin is shown right there within that visual. Again, an area that is prone to flooding. And so establishment of, again, a long-term design there to utilize that property as parkland. And then also, as mentioned earlier, the establishment of greenway system, particularly along Highway 50, as was shown in the first recommendation of the plan. Number 7, development of a community development corporation. And so this is a body that would be set up likely through a combination of representation from both public and private entities. There's a number of institutional entities located within this neighborhood, and of course there's government, city government, county government, but then also private institutions and private citizens or property owners. So essentially forming a body that would work toward the recommendations of this plan and the overall betterment of the neighborhood. Using more business practices and funding, actual money and funding to pursue their goals. Number 8, development of a Great Streets program. So Great Streets is really, and I mentioned this earlier, a general pursuit toward streets being able to be used by multiple modes of transportation. So walking, biking, driving, and transit, buses and such. And so, establishment, and not only along Dunklin Street, but also the other streets within the area, ensuring that they can be used by those different modes of transportation. Number 9, to improve actual and perceived safety within the neighborhood. And so I have 2 visuals up there. One, a picture of a police officer. And again, the Jefferson City Police Department already pursues, not only crime prevention programs, but also enforcement, of course. But then also to encourage, private property owners to arrange their properties in ways that they're perceived to be safe. A neighborhood that is perceived to be safe is often safe. Neighborhoods that are not perceived to be safe often have been showed by studies to be more prone to crime. And so there's an example of Bush's Florist within the neighborhood, having some of their product located out on the sidewalk, very inviting for customers, but also establishes a perception of safety within the area. Number 10, develop a health district by partnering with anchoring institutions. And so there's a number of ways to promote health, particularly within a neighborhood. One is through recreation. And so there's several greenway trail and sidewalk recommendations encouraging people to get out and exercise and be more active. But also items such as being supportive of farmers markets and healthy eating. So next I was going to touch on the 4 long-term focus areas. Again, these are more specific recommendations tied to specific areas within the neighborhood. And the first is focus to build in the heart of the community, kind of building upon the Dunklin Street commercial core. Again, to create it as a revitalized, vibrant, mixed-use district. And so up on the screen is a good visual that it shows some of the recommended land use, some of the existing commercial and proposed infill commercial type uses. But then there's also one recommendation of establishment of a public plaza. And so they did show an actual plaza, what that might look like. And so on this visual, if you can follow the mouse pointer over there, taking an area and turning it into an area where gatherings can be held, be they concerts or things supportive of the festivals that take place in the area. And so a public plaza that's off of the street where such gatherings can be organized and safely held. And so number 2, or B, development of a city park along Wares Creek. And so, as mentioned earlier, so this is a little bit more specific on what that might look like. And so, up on the screen is a visual. You see Missouri Boulevard over here toward the left-hand side of the screen, and Highway 50 toward the top of the screen, and then a very large park shown there along Wares Creek. Of course, there are a number of industrial-style buildings that are located within that area right now. But it is also located within a floodplain and has various floodplain regulations associated with it. In general, areas prone to flooding are best utilized as either open space or recreation types of uses, things that are not going to be associated with property damage when they flood. And so this is a visual showing essentially what an extension of Washington Park would look like. So it benefits by having Washington Park just on the other side of Highway 54 and in connection via a greenway underneath the highway. And so it certainly has some opportunity for various athletic fields and such. The third item, support Lincoln University's growth. As mentioned, there are a number of institutional uses within the area, and Lincoln University is one of the larger ones. This visual is, shows it well and what the plan is really recommending. And so Lincoln University is kind of handicapped by there not being a real strong commercial presence near the neighborhood. There is a bit of a commercial use, in various directions, a few blocks away from the university, but it could benefit by having some commercial or mixed use closer to the core of their campus. So that's what the plan is recommending. So up on the screen is a visual showing their campus and some of the outlying area. I apologize, the mouse is very jumpy in this room, but right there is Dunklin Street. And so essentially identifying the areas just on the opposite side of Dunklin Street from the university as being intended for commercial or mixed use. And then also some of the other areas, and so those commercial uses are shown in red, but some of the others shown in orange up there, identifying them as targeted toward residential or particularly multifamily type of use. The idea being that they would be ideal to house not only students but also just general residents within the area. And the fourth item, improve the Stadium Boulevard and US 54 interchange. So this is a recommendation within the plan that identifies that interchange as being, that has room for improvement around it. It can be a bit of a traffic situation. The off ramps on the highway are not the best designed in the world. They have short ramps, and so the general idea here is that a redevelopment not only of the traffic situation with that area, but also many of the private properties and commercial uses within that area might be a long-term benefit. And so this is a long-term focus of a general redevelopment of commercial uses and the roadway network within that area. And so next I'll touch on the implementation and phasing plan. So the plan does make some recommendations on timing of various items. Basically present it in 4 different parts, starting with the more immediate or short term, the 0 to 7 year type of recommendations, where perhaps improvements to the Highway 50, establishing it as more of a landscaped or greenway network along the highway is completed. Improvements to Dunklin Street completed, and establishment of Monroe Street as a two-way street with two-way traffic. Currently, Monroe Street is a one-way for a short stretch, and so it doesn't allow for two-way traffic along its entire length. Establishment of housing incentives and creation of the Community Development Corporation, and also various zoning district revisions to match up with the land use plan that's contained within the neighborhood plan, along with overlay districts for architectural design requirements. The next item, a timeline of 5 to 15 years, where perhaps developments along Dunklin Street and the Lincoln University mixed-use developments may be progressing about that time, and also streetscape improvements along Jefferson and Madison Street. And then stretching out to a 10 to 20-year horizon where some of the Washington Park type elements might be ready to be considered, improvements to Stadium Boulevard and Madison Street. And then further out to a 20-year type horizon where the longer-term recommendations of the plan really come into play of looking at the stadium and Highway 54, interchange, reconfiguration, redevelopment around that area. The plan does contain a land use plan, so recommendations on land use within the neighborhood. That's the page that's shown within the plan. I have a slightly blown up version to touch on just a few items. Generally speaking, it's looking at recommending Dunklin Street, again, be a storefront commercial type of development. So, establishing a zoning district and overlay district that would require storefront development along that stretch of Dunklin Street would be one item that would be recommended by the plan. A mixed-use district along Broadway Street and some of the adjacent streets shown up there, and I guess that's Broadway essentially just south of Highway 50, stretching to just south of Dunklin Street. This is an area that already has a number of commercial uses within existing residential buildings. Single-family uses for many of the existing single-family areas. Many of these areas, for example, this area shown here, kind of to the southwest of the commercial core of Dunklin Street, and then this area to the southeast, are zoned multifamily. Even though they're primarily used single-family, there can be various individual buildings that have been converted to multiple units. But the plan is essentially recommending that those be downzoned to a single-family residential category. It does have a number of apartment areas, so areas that are existing apartments and the property surrounding them, establishing, just strengthening and reinforcing their multifamily use. Commercial corridor along much of Madison Street, but not all of it. Some of the area immediately outside of the Dunklin Street corridor is essentially targeted for more multifamily rather than highway commercial type of use. A number of areas recommended for institutional use, including a significant portion of area here that is currently used in a single-family residential manner, but has been acquired over the years by neighboring institutional uses. Essentially, the plan would recommend reinforcement of that long-term redevelopment of that area away from single-family to more of an institutional category, or perhaps commercial. Again, some recommendations regarding mixed use and multifamily use surrounding Lincoln University, and general redevelopment area located there around the Highway 54 and Stadium Boulevard interchange area. And so this is a slide that was presented at the work session as well, and I just wanted to kind of reinforce some of the staff comments regarding this. So again, this plan was prepared by an outside consulting firm, but staff has reviewed it extensively, and so this is essentially what we have to say about it, is that it is a very targeted plan toward a specific area of the city, and is suitable in terms of its scope as a neighborhood plan. that their process that they followed included an appropriate public involvement process and engaged a significant number of people within the community and a significant cross-section as well. So it was very publicly oriented. That it was built upon established urban planning principles. This is a professional consulting firm that has done similar processes in other communities and has a higher level of experience than could be obtained by utilizing the city staff. And so a professional consulting firm, put down these professional principles within this plan. And that the plan has an appropriate mix of preservation and redevelopment recommendations, with design and architectural recommendations that would build on historic resources of the area. So it does contain some redevelopment recommendations, some areas that are proposed for uses that are not currently there. And that can be a touchy subject within a community. But it also has some strong recommendations regarding historic preservation and preservation of existing architectural features by reinforcing them when any new development occurs to be built in the same style as the existing historical buildings in the area. And that the recommendations of the plan are targeted, achievable, and the plan is appropriate for incorporation as a component of the comprehensive plan. That's basically where the city staff stand on it. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Certainly be happy to go into any more detail on any particular component if you wish. And as mentioned before, there's a representative from Capital Region Medical Center who again sponsored this plan that might have a few words to say as well.
All right, thank you, Eric. Before we get to Capital Region representative, why don't we see if any of the commission members have any questions for city staff at this point? Go ahead.
Does H3 Studio have any examples of their planning that has worked in the past?
They do.
Particular areas?
They do. I mean, they have a portfolio of examples of plans that they've conducted. I'd have a hard time representing them.
Right, but I mean, do they have like a website that I can go to and look at the planning?
Yes, they do have a website, and it does showcase some of the different projects that they've worked on in the past. So yes.
Any other questions from the commission members for city staff at this point? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. I think Mr. Cavaruso, if you'd like to come forward, if you would, introduce yourself, give us your address, and if you'd like to add anything to the city staff.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. My name, can you hear me okay? Here, I'll move it up. Gasper Calvaruso, president of Capital Region Medical Center, 3551 Antietam Court. Thank you very much for a very thorough presentation. Eric does a really nice job explaining a very long and a long process that took a lot of time. It just wasn't put together in one swoop. I'm here on behalf of the plan. H3 Studios representative Tim Bryan couldn't make it here tonight, but he was the principal on this project. And Mr. Vaughn, to kind of answer your question, Eric gave a kind of a history of how this got started. Capital Region was very interested in doing something, being proactive. We, as Eric mentioned, we just recently invested $37 million in a new expansion for our hospital. We believe it's important that the neighborhood that we live in and work in is thriving and vibrant and safe and all those kinds of things. And so I've had the pleasure of working with H3 in a different market. Prior to coming to Capital Region, I was in St. Charles working for a hospital in downtown St. Charles that had a lot of similar aspects that the old Munichburg South Side area had. So they have worked there. You can go to downtown to St. Charles and kind of see some of the work that they've done. I believe they've worked in Columbia on some specific projects there, as well as down in Arkansas, a number, Omaha, Nebraska. I think their website would be well representative of some of the work they've done. And so really, this is a community plan. Capital Region has just been, I believe, the catalyst to get things kick-started. And so that was really our role in this. And so I just have a couple of thoughts to share with this committee. First off, it is a community plan. There was a lot of engagement. As soon as we engaged with them, as Eric mentioned, H3 Studios has a process that is worked in other communities. And so, business members, neighborhood residents were all part of those charrettes. We had an advisory board that included a lot of the key stakeholders in this area, like Lincoln University and the city. Even MoDOT was a part of that advisory group. And so this process took, gosh, how long? A year at least. It's taken us 2 years to get to this point, but through the charrettes, there was a lot of work that was done prior. There was a lot of work that was done with the community, and so I guess my point is that this is really what was presented here today is really a result of community ideas. And so the ideas around safety, the ideas around streetscaping, the ideas around building up that business core area and building up Old Munichburg are coming from the community. The other thing I wanted to mention is this is a path forward for our community. Eric didn't mention any dollars associated with this plan, but I will tell you from past experience and in talking with H3 Studios, if you don't have a plan, then things will happen as things happen. And so that's the benefit of adoption of a plan by the city, because then we have some goals to achieve, and then you can mobilize community leaders, the neighborhood, et cetera, to try to follow some of these tenets of the plan and try to follow through on them. And as Eric mentioned, the recommendations from H3, this is not a 1 or a 2 year thing. This is a 5, a 10, a 15, a 20-year plan that really needs to be worked at in order to see the achievements of that goal. So those are really the comments that I'd like to share. I also would like to thank the city for its participation and cooperation. They've been fantastic as far as being a resource and helping us with this process. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Casper. At this point, does any of the commission members have any questions?
Do you have any idea, once all this regulatory thing gets out of the way as far as getting this approved, roughly how long it would take to get the Community Development Corporation up and running?
That's a great question, and my answer is I don't know. But certainly part of what H3 would tell you here is that that's one of the key things that needs to be addressed right off the bat. Because as of with any plan, and I've heard it from Mr. Freeman many, many times, these plans get put on a shelf and then they just sit there. The idea behind the CDC is that then you have resources to really start digging in on the projects, because a capital region, the city, Lincoln University, the school district, Helias, we're running hospitals, schools, those kinds of things, and it's hard to focus on this as well as our own businesses. And so we can certainly help support that, but we will have to work in a community fashion to see how we can support that CDC.
I don't know if this is a question for you or maybe for Eric or both, but who do you picture as being the impetus for getting this up, the CDC up and running?
Well, I don't know, Eric, if you have thoughts. I mean, we have an advisory board that's associated with this particular project. I think there's a lot of folks on that group that can start that process. Certainly, Capital Region as a partner in this, is very interested in helping facilitate that.
Is there any other questions at this point? Thanks, sir. Eric, at this point, are you wanting to move on to open it up to those in the audience?
Yes, open public hearing.
Okay. One of the questions that I kind of had for you and Casper is, this is a nice document. We have seen that in our special meeting. Obviously, the document is not, full document is not here tonight. Has that been made available via the city website or other avenues where people could have looked at, or at this point still can?
Yes, the full document is posted on the city website, specifically the Planning and Zoning Commission's website. Link within the city website under this the case number for this evening. And so anyone from the public can go onto the city website, find the link for the Planning and Zoning Commission, and view the entire plan. I believe it's 136 pages that's located on there. So.
Okay, thank you. At this point, we will open up to the audience. What I would ask is, if you'd like to come up and speak this evening, we will start with those that are in favor and move on from there. When you come to the podium, please state your name and address for the record, and then we'll let you ask any questions that you have, and we'll be able to try to answer those for you. So with that being said, I will open it up. If there's anyone in the audience tonight that would like to come up and speak in favor of this request, please come forward.
My name is Tom Meeks. I have many business ventures here in town. I own Rosewood Music at 222 West Dunklin. I used to live in the district right behind the hospital at 400 Woodlawn Avenue, and currently reside at 912 Oakwood. That was 400 Woodlawn, excuse me. I'm a planner by nature. That's what I do for a living, except in the systems world. Without a plan, it will just deteriorate, as the president back here said. And as an investment in that neighborhood, as also one of the companies I own is a little company called Vintage Homes. Buy older buildings, renovate those buildings. Jefferson City, in that area in particular, is not conducive to that, because I can plow a lot of money into buildings and I'm not going to get it back. But with a plan, with zoning, with requirements that says you're going to stand to certain standards in those areas, then you're going to increase the value of the property. You're going to increase your value to be able to rent out of those places. And so those things I encourage. Sure, there's some things that's particulars I don't like, but you've got to have a plan. And bottom line is the plan is never going to implement as you have it planned, but you're going to have some direction to go. This is a professional done job. I do this for a living. It's well organized, well thought out, good involvement. So I would recommend the addressing and accepting this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meeks. Is there any question for him from the commission members? Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to come up and speak in favor of this? Once again, please give your name and address.
My name's Phil Freeman, 1324 Roseview Drive. I own Freeman Marcher on the south side. I want to be here tonight to compliment Gasper, Eric, everyone that's been involved in this plan. It's been going on for almost 2 years. There have been multiple meetings of personnel, of city involvement, and more importantly, the residents of the area. Dave, you asked about the CDC. I'll remind you, some of the largest employers in Jefferson City, without the state, are located in this district. And I'll point out Central Dairy, Capital Region, Coca-Cola, Bechtel Beverage are all located in there. As far as farming a CDC, I don't think we'll have any problem getting that done. So I would hope that you don't worry about the funding sources. That will be taken care of. That will be our charge. Couple things. I'm also chairman of the Old Town Redevelopment, and we're charged with redeveloping all of the internet, and we're completely supportive of what's going on East Capitol Street. But we seem to make sure that we make an investment in the old Muhlenberg and the south side, because it is an extremely important area. We have spent a lot of time, a lot of money. There's been a lot of development recently in the 100 block of East Duncan. Larry Cobb, Steve Rollins have revitalized that in 2008. That was virtually vacant. I used the old adage in 2008. You could shoot a shotgun down the middle of East Duncan Street at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, not hit anybody. Now you can't find a place to park. So it's a good thing. There's a lot of things going on. I would encourage each of you tomorrow, I hope you vote tonight or you will, but drive into the south side from Monroe Street, from Madison Street, from Jefferson Street, and look at that creek. That's an embarrassment. I mean, that's the entrance to the south side in Old Munichburg, and it's a bunch of trees. There's trash up in the trees. So I encourage you to support this. I thank Gasper. I thank Eric. I think that there's a lot of good things on the horizon, and hopefully you'll support it tonight. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Phil. Is there any questions for Phil at this point? Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to come and speak in favor of this request? Okay, we will move on to those who are in opposition. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in opposition to this request? Come forward and state your name and address for the record. Okay, I'm seeing none. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to just speak on this request? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
My name is John Crook. I live at 515 Mulberry. Okay? Over the past 4 or 5 years, I've had a substantial investment in that particular house, which is now declared as something that needs to be, got to put my other glasses on, needs infill residential building. Okay? That is not only my house, it's also a home business. Okay? I have put tons of money in there. Okay? But let me tell you, who am I really fighting here? If somebody wants that house, am I fighting eminent domain, or am I fighting some type of guy who's a developer? Okay? That's my question. Like I said, I made substantial investment in that house. That house has had some of the best people, the Vogels and everybody else living in it. Ain't nothing wrong with that house. It's not a rent house. It's my house. Okay? Now, last thing. Your graphics really suck. Okay? I can't tell the difference between an existing commercial building and need residential, infill residential buildings, okay? Well, that's about it. So I want to thank you for your time, particularly Commissioner Jordan and all the members. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. We appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions for him at this point? Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak on this request? If so, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
So I didn't get any stakeholders information at all. I got nothing as a stakeholder.
Okay. I will close testimony at this point. Eric, would you like to address a couple of his concerns at this point?
I think I can try to address that. I also wanted to mention what happens next, also just to make sure everyone knows what the purpose of the meeting this evening. Again, if the Planning and Zoning Commission chooses to approve this plan, it'd be in the form of a resolution, and so that resolution is contained within your packets, and so that would be ultimately what you would be making a motion to approve and then voting on. After that, as is our practice in Jefferson City, we would forward this document on to the City Council for their recommendation in terms of the plan, and hold a similar public hearing in front of the City Council, and so there's another step, another method for any other additional public comment that there might be after this meeting. Now, specifically in terms of the comments from Mr. Cook, the recommendations of a plan for an entire neighborhood can be very broad. It's a very broad brush that's painted with recommendations at this level. And so zeroing in on a specific area, and I suspect, I believe the $500 is perhaps right there. Targeting that area as new, infill residential buildings. Well, what does that mean? Okay, well, it means that there's a city plan in place that would target that area for new residential infill development if that opportunity were to arise. It means that, if the city's going to establish zoning districts or overlay, architectural types of requirements, that that area would be zoned in that manner to support that recommendation. Does it mean the city's going to go in and eminent domain the property? No, that's not the purpose of this plan. There's other actions that would be taken before the city would be doing something like that. And so no, it's not an effort to tear people's houses down. It's a general recommendation for redevelopment of certain areas. You just happen to be on a block that's targeted for one of those things. So, regarding the graphics, it can be hard to represent such things on the scale of a neighborhood plan. I mentioned that up front. There is a version of this out in the hallway, blown up, but even at that scale, it can be difficult. And many of the other visuals that are contained within the text of the document kind of zoom in on some of those areas to give a little bit more detail in that regard. And certainly after the meeting, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it. Regarding that, we do have a staff report contained within the packet. It is contained up there on the front bench for the public to look at as well. And really, much of the staff report has really been touched on within the presentation. So skip ahead to the recommendation at the end of it, and that is that the staff does recommend approval of the plan for the reasons that are outlined in the last slide of the presentation. The recommended form of the motion is at the bottom of the staff report there. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions prior to the Planning and Zoning Commission discussing it prior to motion. So.
Thank you, Eric. At this point, do any of the commissioners have any questions for Eric or other city staff that's here tonight? Well, if we don't have any questions or anything like that, we will move on to discussion. And from there, if someone would like to make a motion, like Eric mentioned, we will make it in a positive manner. I think he's got that in the staff report for us, so I will open that up to the commissioners at this point.
I would move that we approve the resolution as presented in our informational packet, that we adopt the Historic South Side Old Munichburg District and Neighborhood Plan as a component or part of the Jefferson City Comprehensive Plan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion at this point? All those in the favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. I think Eric mentioned earlier that if it was approved by this body, it will be forwarded to the City Council. Once again, that will be a public hearing, very similar to this meeting tonight. That meeting is scheduled for when?
That meeting is scheduled for August 21st at 6 p.m. in this room. That is a Monday. There's one thing that I realize I failed to mention is the public involvement process, or the public notification process that we undertook at the staff level. You may have noticed the zoning public hearing signs that we scattered, 4 of them through the neighborhood, and tried to locate them at key intersections. And so those signs do have both tonight's date, for this public hearing, but also the public hearing date for that city council meeting. Obviously, because of the size of the area, there is not an individual mailing made to everyone within, all the property owners within the area. But it is, of course, a public process that's been conducted up to this point, and still to be held in front of the city council.
And once again, that document is available on the internet for people to view between now and the city council meeting, and possibly you could zoom in or something like that to the graphics a little bit.
Yes, that is correct.
Yes, sir.
Just to add on to that, for the charrettes, we did send to all of the residents and businesses the notices of, I think it was 4 charrettes that occurred.
Thank you. Okay, that case will be forwarded to the City Council once again on August 21st at 6 p.m. And if anyone has any questions, they can also contact city staff between now and then. Is that correct, Eric?
That is correct. I'd certainly be happy to speak to anyone who has any questions on it.
Very good. Thank you. We will continue to move along this evening. We'll move on to our other business. We have election of officers. I don't blame you. Thank you all for coming this evening. We'll give you a minute to exit. That didn't sound fun, did it? They were gone. I tell you, we did a great job of getting them out of here. Okay, the room's pretty well cleared out. We'll continue to move forward. We will move on once again to the election of officers. Eric, would you tell us what we need to do there?
I believe the position of chairman is open for election. And vice chair.
I was hoping I would open up badly enough you'd say, this is embarrassing, and get rid of me.
And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, is it I that am typically elected as secretary?
Yeah,
No?
but it's not, we don't.
Not required. Okay. So just chairman and vice chairman.
I think Mr. Yarnell is vice chair, correct?
Yes.
If you guys want to put up with me again, I'll be glad to do it. If someone would love to have the hot seat, that's understandable as well too. But if everybody's fine with that, I'll do it. If somebody will make a motion, and we'll move forward.
I will move that we keep the same officers.
Chairman and vice chairman will do it all in one fell swoop.
Yes, officers, the whole slate of officers.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to leave all officers as they were in the previous years. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you guys for your support. I believe under other business, Michael has something he would like to tell us about.
Yeah, I just want the commissioners to know about this forum that's going to be held on Monday. It's called Surviving Healthcare Reform. It's going to be at Lincoln University at the MLK Thomas Pauley Theater on Dunklin Street. It's free and open to the public. I know people wonder what's going to happen with the funding of health care, and at this forum we have some excellent speakers. The former insurance commissioner of Missouri is going to be there, and several other knowledgeable speakers, and then we're going to have a panel to field questions from the audience. So hopefully we'll have a good turnout and hear what possibly is going to happen and affect individuals in the whole community, and maybe get some different ideas about what reforms would maybe make more sense. I don't know. Come out and express your opinion. Ask your questions.
Appreciate you bringing that to us. You say it is open to the public. It is free.
It's free and open
It
to
is
the public.
this coming Monday night,
Yes, starts at 6:30
6:30
at Thomas Parley Theater. It's 812 East Dunklin.
Great. All right.
I don't have. There's a couple brochures if you want to.
Great.
Stop and look at it. Please come out. Let other people know.
Very good. Thank you for bringing that to us. Is there any other business this evening?
I do have one announcement, echoing on Mr. Vaughn's comments at the last meeting. I think we need to try to do a better job of keeping the Planning and Zoning Commission informed of decisions made at the City Council level, after the cases pass through this body. And so I do want to update you on this particular case that was held. I guess there's about a 2-month lag then on this. The Veith Drive case where proposing a PUD plan, rezoning, and PUD plan for a daycare and skilled nursing facility was approved by the City Council at their meeting on June 19th. It was a close vote. It was 6 in favor and 4 against. And no, I think there were a number of different concerns by the City Council that were expressed, a number of concerns voiced in the public hearing portion of their meeting. And I wanted to then also inform you of the process that plan will be going through, because it's a little different than is typical for a plan. We usually represent final PUD plans as being able to be approved administratively at a staff level after the preliminary plan is approved by the council. Okay, that is actually a decision up to the director of the department director's discretion. And so in this case, the department director has stated that will not be processing that final PUD plan at an administrative level and actually forwarding that plan to the City Council for its final determination on the not only the final approval, but also any specific design elements contained within it. So I think the consultant has gone back and tinkered with the design just a little bit. And some of the things that were even brought up at this level moved a play area a little bit further from a property line, provided some additional information regarding traffic and stormwater runoff items that were expressed, concerns expressed at the City Council level. And resubmitted that plan. We have a plan in staff's, it was submitted just earlier this week, and so we haven't had an opportunity to post it publicly or anything, but we'll be doing so. And that will go back to the City Council. We have not set a timeline for that, but it will not be going through this body. I wanted to make sure that was clear. Is a final plan that will be going directly to the City Council. We are going to mail notices to property owners, very similar to the way we do for planning and zoning. We'll also be posting a zoning sign out in front, but it's not a planning and zoning matter. It is a City Council approval or denial.
Thank you for the update. Appreciate that. I know that was one that was a little bit tough because of the area and the neighborhood and things like that. So,
yep.
With that, is there any other comments or concerns? And if not, we will be adjourned. Thank you guys for coming this evening.